Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Great to see everybody today. Hopefully you're doing well on this fine Friday, and happy Halloween, everybody. Happy Halloween. Um, Hopefully some of you have some fun things set up for this evening. Um, Personally, I'm just hoping for a bunch of kids to take all this candy that I have. Um, just need to get rid of it at this point. It's great to see everybody today. Thanks for joining us again. Um, Good topics coming up as well. This session for Compliant Meets AI is going to be focusing on communication compliance. We'll talk about what it is, and then we'll talk about, how we set it up, and then what are some of the things we can do with it? What kind of alerts do we see? What kind of actions can we take? All those will be available, and we'll walk through those, doing some live demos. So lots of good stuff on the radar for today. We'll leave some time for Q&A at the end as well, but always feel free to ask questions as we go. So everybody's mic is going to be disabled during the session, just to cut down on chatter for now. Once we go in the Q&A session, we'll basically give everybody the ability to re-enable their mic, or I'll re-enable your mic, and then you can come off of mute, ask your questions there. But feel free to ask questions as we go as well. So we've got our good friends, Ben and Kevin, on the call again today with us. They'll be helping us out, and they can answer questions as we go. This is going to be recorded. So you will get a copy of the recording a couple days after this. Since it's the holiday, I may just push it. Well, I'll probably just still do it today. I'll try to push it out this afternoon if I can. It just takes a little processing time in the back end. And then there will be a survey that you'll get alongside. I'll be sending an email out at the end of this. It'll have all the links we talked about. It's going to have all the different recordings for our sessions as we went through this. And you'll have that in your inbox this afternoon. Plus, it'll include a copy of this PowerPoint as a PDF as well. Just to say hello to the team again, we've got Ben and Kevin on the call with us. Kevin's going to be hosting our session next week for Insider Risk Management, so looking forward to that. And of course, Ben's done some great sessions with us around DLP and sensitivity labels as well. So they'll be here to help us answer questions, put in some relative links as we go as well. And then, of course, Jay Cotton. I'll be your host again today. Microsoft architect, been here now 14 and a half years, almost to 15. That gets kind of crazy when you say that out loud. But great to see everybody here again today. Good content. And like I said, keep those questions coming in the chat window. Just to review the sessions we've done, I'll include a link to all of these as well in my email when I send this out today. So you can have the recordings. All the recordings have been sent out previously as well, so they're all there available, but I'll just make sure we'll double team, or I'll send them out, and I may paste the links back in at the end of the session today as well. So today is going to be communication compliance, and then next week we've got insider risk. That's going to be a great one as well. So please, everybody, sign up for that if you haven't registered. aka.ms/compliance-meets-AI. You can just register there for our final session. And also keep an eye on your inboxes. We're planning on a second series of these starting after the new year, so in 2026. And feel free, any feedback you have, any topics you want us to cover, drop them in chat, drop me an email, j.cotton@microsoft.com. We'd like to take your feedback. And again, I'll put that in the survey too. What sessions would you like to see next week or next year? Next year, literally, it will be next year. So we'll have that as well. So please give us your feedback. Just a reminder also for Coffee and Copilot. It's really tailored toward healthcare customers, but anybody's really free to join this. So if you've got questions about how to use Copilot Chat, remember, sorry, I'm a little under the weather today. Copilot Chat is the Copilot's available for everybody who has an Office 365 license, so no additional fees for this one. It does have limited functionality, of course, so it's really web-grounded chat. You can do things like upload a document, revise it, review it, summarize it, those types of things. But it doesn't have that full graph capability. But these are really great sessions. I do recommend everybody to just jump in. They do 3 a week, I think. And you can register at aka.ms/HLS-coffee. They're great sessions. You might even see me there helping out on the back end as well. So please register for those if you can. And last thing I just want to touch on is everything that we've talked about during these series, whether that's DLP, whether that is DSPM for AI, communication compliance, e-discovery, insider risk, all of these. Microsoft has classes available for you to consume these. They're called onboarding accelerators, and they're really there to help you kind of get things kicked and running and kicked off the ground with the help of a Microsoft CSA like myself or Ben or Kevin. So we host these sessions. They are classes. You can bring up to like 16 people or so to them. They're usually 1 day, sometimes they're 2 days. And they're usually done remote, but a lot of people are opting in for the more in-person model as well. So those things are available to you to be led by a Microsoft engineer. Talk to your Microsoft account manager, whoever that may be. If you don't know who that is, drop me a line and I can help you find some. I know a couple people have already done that, and I'm trying to track them down for you. So if you have reached out to me about your account manager, rest assured I'm working on it. Microsoft is a big company, so sometimes it's just hard to find things. But yeah, reach out to me, j.cott@microsoft.com with any questions about these as well, or talk to your Microsoft account manager. All right, so let's go ahead and hop into content. We are talking about communication compliance today, and we're talking about how we use it or how it can be used to monitor Copilot. Communication compliance is an interesting story. So it has been around for actually quite a long time. It's went through a different couple name changes, actually. Originally, it was there for email. So it was there to monitor email communications for things like keywords, sensitive information types came later. We started using trainable classifiers on it, but it was really just intended for email at that point. And then it's kind of moved on. So it's moved over to Teams, so you can have communication compliance going in Teams. You can have it working on Viva Engage, and we can also now use it for Copilot. And even some of these third-party sources we can also integrate with. I'm not going to go too deep into that one, and I'm really going to focus just on Copilot today, to tell you the truth. But no, it is available in all these different modalities. And if you look at this and you remember the conversation we had last week about e-discovery, all 4 of these locations have something in common. And that is they all store their data. So whenever you do a chat message or you do a post in Viva Engage, it's all stored in your inbox, along with your emails and everything else, and at this point, Copilot. So all those are actually kept inside of your inbox. And that's how a lot of this technology that we're talking about works. That's how some of this DLP functionality works. That's how e-discovery works, of course, retention and communication compliance. So all these are basically reading data out of your inbox as you put in our case for Copilot, as you put in prompts and responses. And that's what we can do, and that's how we can see them with communication compliance. Now that box, that location within your email where these are stored, you can't really see inside of it. The only way you can really get at it is with e-discovery, or if you are familiar with MFC Mappy, one of our more low-lying tools to look at inbox issues, you can see it that way as well. But the easiest way for most administrators is going to be e-discovery. I don't know a lot of people that use MFC Mappy that much anymore. I still crack it open every now and then if I have a really weird Outlook issue going on. But it is a way to do it. But we're talking about Copilot. So when you're working with communication compliance, first step really is you create policies. Well, the first step is really you want to figure out what you want to monitor for at the end of the day. And I'll go through the options there. Are we looking for things like inappropriate use of AI? Unethical use of AI, prompt injection attacks. These are some of the ones that we have built-in policies for within communication compliance as it relates to Copilot. But you can also expand out from there. You can use trainable classifiers to look for things like, oh gosh, all sorts of different examples. Corporate communications, salary communications, hate speech, anger, threatening materials, threatening posts, all these different things you can look for. And, it depends really what you're trying to achieve with communication compliance. Do you want to monitor things like sensitive information type to see when people are interacting? In my case, I work with a lot of healthcare customers. It always comes down to things like medical terms and conditions or drug names. So ICMs, all those other ones that are out there. Usually is where we come down. Also, things like custom sensitive information types. A lot of organizations, at least in the healthcare, they'll do things like create custom sits for MRN numbers, right? So patient information that's in something like Epic or some of these other tools that they use with them. So we'll create policies around that. But it really depends on your industry, right? So, that type of data you're looking for, think about it pretty similar to how you think about your DLP policies, in my mind. It's how I just kind of frame with people. If you're monitoring for people to, send credit card information or social securities or whatever that may be, depending on your industry, via DLP, it's probably a good idea to monitor it for Copilot too. Because we do want to make sure people are using this information the proper way, and we'll be able to keep track of it. And that's really what communication compliance is here for us to do. There are some actions we can take, but for the most part, it is a monitoring tool, so we can see how people are using Copilot, getting data out of there, what kind of prompts they're using, and is it something we need to be concerned about, in a nutshell. As you configure them, there's quite a few options. I'm going to go through these options live, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this particular slide, but I wanted to include it just for when I email it out to everybody. So you have the options about what you're looking for, right? So that's add conditions. There's a possibility of doing OCR. That may or may not apply for Copilot, depending on what you're trying to do. I can see some situations where you may be scanning something and using Copilot on it. So it could be an option. Just remember with OCR, there is a charge involved for using that. It's minimal, but there is one there. The review percentage is how much of a particular activity you want to review. So if you set up something to say, I want to monitor credit card numbers. Do I want to see every single instance of when a credit card number is put into Copilot? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Depends on how you're using it. But that's what that slider means. So basically it's saying, okay, you want to see 100% of every single hit that is brought up there, or do you want to see 50%, or do you want to see 10%? It just kind of depends on what the data you're looking for is and how sensitive it is, how much you want to see at that point. Then we have quite a few ways to investigate this. So we have the policy page. That's on the upper right. This is where we can dive into those particular alerts, see actually what was done, and then take actions on them. And I'll show you that here in a second. You have your alerts. So those display your last 3 days. That's on the left-hand side. Well, I'll show you. You can see it on the screen as well. And then you have some aggregate reporting as well. So you can actually go through some reports to go back a little bit further in time. You can see things like most triggered users, so who the people that actually triggered the policy the most. You can see what type of sensitive information may be involved the most. A lot of these different things you can actually put in there. You can also see things that have been resolved. So that's one of the actions too. Maybe something happens and it seems to be normal activity, so we resolve it. That way it's flushed out of the system. So you can also see the ones that are resolved as well. And then we'll look at this more, but as we get into it, we can review the actual email. We can review the Copilot prompts and responses they have in there. And then we can make different sorts of judgments on it. Is it misclassified? We could do that. We can resolve it as misclassified, or we can just resolve it as normal behavior too. Or we can take additional actions like set up an e-discovery case, escalate it to somebody else for them to look at it as well. And then you can see kind of the actions we can take here. So we can resolve it. We could use it to trigger a power automate flow. I would say that's not hugely common, but it is. And by default, the easiest one is you set up a flow that's going to notify a manager once that particular alert has been triggered. I don't see that used a lot, but it is something that we can do out there. Plus, you can do other things with it. With Power Automate, you could re-archive the email. You could do all sorts of weird things with it. So that's a possibility. You can tag it. So you can tag it for further review. So if something is compliant, non-compliant. That's usually when I'm thinking about, I'm working with a team, right? So I've got a few different people that are looking at these particular alerts as they come through. I can tag it as being compliant. That way people know, hey, this is okay. I looked at it. I put a couple comments in there. Or perhaps it's non-compliant or even questionable. So that would just flag it as something we maybe need to take up for further review as well. Then you can do notification. So that's really sending a notification out to the end user. You can use customized templates for that. There's escalate. So that's basically escalating it to somebody else who has permissions to review these alerts. So for instance, if Ben and I were both working on this, and Ben's one of the other people who can review this, I want him to take a look at it so I can escalate it over to Ben. So it'll pop into his inbox so he can take a peek as well. So another option, escalate for investigation. When I do that, it's actually going to create an e-discovery case. It's going to send a notification over our e-discovery manager as well, so they can kind of take a deeper look. Maybe they need to put data on hold. Maybe they need to do an export, all these different type of things they are. Then if you're a Teams user, you can actually take things out of Teams, but that's not really what we're talking about today and does not apply to Copilot. And then we talked about the reports. So we'll take a look at those reports live. Right. So let's go ahead and pop in here to the tenant. Let me check chat really quick. Any questions in chat so far, Ben or Kevin?
I believe we have answered them. So we're doing all right, unless anyone wants to pull anything out. So I think we're good.
Good deal. Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. So let's go ahead and pop in here. I'm working on one monitor today, so forgive me. I'm trying to get this the best way possible. There we go. All righty. So here we are in the Purview Center. Couple things to note here. We do have a few settings for communication compliance. So if you look at the settings all up on the right-hand side, you can see communication compliance here. And there's just a few real settings in here. First off is notification templates. So if you want to create a template that's going to be sent out. So if I escalate to somebody, so you can instance see the one I've created here, notify a violation to AI policy. You can see basically it's going to be coming from me. I could CC other people when I set this policy up. So maybe I want to send it to my compliance manager or somebody along those lines, just depending on who you want to actually have other eyes on this. And then you can configure that subject and you configure the body. So this is something when we escalate an issue with communication compliance. So somebody sent something in and it looks like it's a little dodgy for whatever reason. We can actually send them an email. Say, you know what, this is a violation of your AI policy. I would probably have, documentation linked here to where the actual AI policy is. Living on your intranet site, most organizations have something along those lines these days. So I'd put that in there too, just so they understand really what's going on. Sentiment analysis is just really looking at how in our case, the prompt would be kind of phrased. Is it, the things really be kind of looking out for are the ones that are negative. So if it's a negative response, it's kind of going to give, or negative contents or negative sentiment, it's going to kind of imply that maybe somebody's saying something inappropriate, those types of things. But you can turn this on or off. It's just another column that you'll see in the policy as you're reviewing these alerts as well. So just be aware of that one. Cross-policy resolution, definitely something to turn on. So basically when you turn this on, if you do have, let's say, a policy or a particular policy that's been triggered in communication compliance, it's also been triggered, let's say, in insider risk. So we can actually go through and, or even multiple policies in communication compliance. If we resolve it in one location, it can resolve it in more than one location. So basically it's taking away some of that chatter that you would see when you resolve something in one policy, because it's very possible somebody could trigger two policies with one Copilot prompt. If you're looking for, let's say, sensitive information and possibly unethical in two separate policies, you could do that. So it'll resolve it against both. Teams doesn't really matter for us because that's just for Teams recordings, so it's not really too much that we're talking about. And then policy match preservation, and this is just about how, when you have a policy match, how long it's going to be before they're deleted. So you can see a few options here: 1 month, 6 months, 1 year, 7 years. And there's no custom on this one, so you pretty much have to go with that one. So just be aware of those settings. Okay. So let's actually get into communication compliance. Yeah, we're doing good. So you'll see on the left-hand side under solutions, and here's our communication compliance portal. A couple things to walk through just to kind of get you familiar with it. Of course, we have our overview, and this is kind of just giving you, excuse me, some suggestions on what to create. So you can create a policy. This one's looking for inappropriate text. That one hasn't been created yet. Looking for sensitive information types. So they're just giving you some suggestions. You also notice it's also showing some of these different sits that it thinks I might be concerned about. So for instance, you have SSNs over here, you've got classification of diseases, and this is all information that's been flowing through my tenant via Copilot, via Teams, via Outlook, or via Exchange, just basically me doing all these different testings. And then Project Thunderbolt is a custom sit that I've set up as well. So you can and it's just giving you suggestions at this point. Maybe you want to do a communication compliance on communication or classification of diseases. So you could do that. It's just making some suggestions for you. Your policies is where you actually create policies, and this is where we can do some review as well. So notice again, it's giving me a little bit of prompt here, or just a recommendation here about doing this. And that's because there were some user-reported messages from a Teams perspective. This is something that I was doing that's for testing to show people off. Not really Copilot relevant, but it is a good example of how it can actually look at things going on in your tenant and make suggestions about what kind of policies you may want to think about. Pay as you go, definitely not going to go too much into that one, but suffice to say, there is one real piece within communication compliance that may include pay-as-you-go. Pay-as-you-go billing, basically, you set up a subscription, you tie it to an Azure subscription, and it's used by whichever workload you choose within Purview. Interesting question, and just something for everybody's edification. This came up to me last week and / this week. So when you set up pay-as-you-go, let's say for communication compliance, you also have to set up a separate one if you also want to use insider risk, or if you want to use some more of the advanced DLP pieces. So they're all retained, or it's all earmarked just for Purview usage. So if you set it up, it's not going to be used by, let's say, Security Copilot or anything else like that. All those have their separate subscriptions, but just be aware of that. And the one really to note here is when we're talking trainable classifiers, if you do want to use what they call premium trainable classifiers, and I'll show you what those are here in a second, that's where the pay-as-you-go model slips in for communication compliance. Here we go. So if you go all the way down, actually, let's see the built-ins. You can actually see them all the way down for their premiums at the bottom, and they all revolve around threat, targeted harassment, stock manipulation, and all the rest of those. So those are our premium classifiers, and that's where it would come in that you would have to use the pay-as-you-go model. So just be aware of that one. The documentation runs through it pretty well, which ones are pay-as-you-go, even runs you through how to set up pay-as-you-go too. So just be aware that's there. But these trainable classifiers are all something that we could use for communication compliance if we so choose. There's also some built-in ones that we'll look at when it comes to things like inappropriate use of AI, unethical use of AI, those types of things. And I'll show you those here in a second. You can also use classifiers, sensitive information types. So you have your sensitive information types here as well. Don't forget those. These can be used for communication compliance policy. And even if you set up EDM, so if you have EDM set up, exact data match, and you're doing something a bit more custom, you could use that as something within communication compliance as well, or even those sensitive information types that are custom. So all of those can be used in a communication compliance policy at that point. And then you have your reporting. So this is where we can do our reports and kind of look at everything that's going on. I'll come back to this in a second. I kind of want to go through a policy first. Okay. So here we are in communication compliance to policy setup place. Pretty straightforward setting these up. We have create policy on the left-hand side here. And you'll notice you have all sorts of different ones. So there is detect Microsoft Copilot interaction. So there's a default one. Plus, then you have inappropriate text, images, not really Copilot specific. So we do need to create or select either this or a custom policy. But I'll look at the default one first to show you what the settings are. And then I'm going to customize it. So I'm going to bring it up in this actual menu so you can see it. As always, as I mentioned before, when you're giving these names and descriptions, if you use the default one, it just calls it Microsoft Copilot Interactions, which is annoying. But always give it a good description too, because we want to make sure that we understand what it's set up for, who set it up, in case there's any questions, or we have to go back and say, hey, Ben, when you configure this policy, I see that you configured it on the 25th of July. What were we thinking at that time? What were the things we were looking for? Those types of things. So it's just a good way to make sure we have some documentation built in. And I say that about everything. You can use admin units for this. I'm not going to go too deep into admin units, but just think about it as basically a dynamic group within Entra, formerly known as Azure Active Directory, where you can set something up like, you want this your admin unit to include everybody with the country code of France or everybody of the Department of HR, depending on how it does. So it logically groups them, and then I could basically create a communication compliance policy that just is scoped to those admin units. So it wouldn't be just everybody. It wouldn't be just a few people. It would be the people that are in that particular admin unit. Nice thing about admin units, if your Azure Active Directory is up to date and it's managed well, then you don't have to care and feed for those groups. So if somebody is removed from that role or they move countries, that country code or that job role code is going to change in Entra or go away completely. So they would be removed from this policy. And as people are added in and they take a job role that says they're in HR, they're automatically then added to this policy as well. So just a way of doing some dynamic grouping. It's useful in lots of situations, especially multi-country or multinational organizations. I also use it quite a bit if there's a university tied to, well, in my case, hospitals. So we have policies that apply to students and policies that apply to then people that actually work at the hospital. So, and we use basically a job code for that one. So it is useful. But just by default, we can say, what, do you want this to apply to all users? Nice thing about communication compliance is you can really kind of test this out as much as you want to. It's not something you have to turn on from everybody right away. You can just turn it on for your group. Maybe you have 10, 15 people you work with on the compliance side of the house. So you can really just test it out and scope it towards them. So for instance, I can just start picking people out here and adding them in. And just this will be the users that we cover. So you can see Monica, and then I can add another one. So for testing purposes, this is great. For full scale rollout, I don't see a lot of use cases unless you want to create a specific policy just for a few people. Maybe they're senior level HRs, or maybe you want to set up a different policy for your research and development folk, so you can kind of keep an eye on how they're using Copilot. It really just kind of depends. Generally, though, after we get through the testing phase, we'll move over to all users. You can use adaptive scopes if you have those set up, similar to how we use admin units. Is what an adaptive scope is. But I'll just scope this to everybody for now. And you do have that ability to have exclusions. So I can say, and make this everybody, but then don't use a particular group that I have out there. For instance, don't include anybody in the production department, or don't include anybody who is in the Project Falcon group. So you can put exclusions out there if you so choose. And then the reviewer piece. So this is who actually has access to communication reports. They can also see the alerts, and they can also actually go into the policies and review the policies and review the actual things that have been set up there, and all the prompts and responses that have come back. So we do need to choose at least one person here. Best practice, you want to have a couple. You don't want to be doing all this work yourself. You go on vacation, no one else has access. Those sorts of situations. So always kind of tag a few people to actually do that. And then we get into our configuration for what we're actually going to be looking. Now, notice we have Viva Teams engaged, not looking for this at all. So this is just going to be scoped to Copilot at this point. And we're looking for generative AI prompts. So it has this piece in here around what we're actually looking for. And notice where we are looking for this. So at this point, we are looking at Copilot. We are looking at Copilot Studio. Now, what that includes is that includes all Copilot paid interactions. So the paid premium version that you pay $30 a month for, or whatever you get a bargain on or a deal on. It looks at those interactions, and that goes across to everything, whether I'm using it in PowerPoint, Word, Excel, the Copilot app itself, whether I'm using that on mobile, using it on the web. It covers all of that activity. It also covers Copilot Chat. So Copilot Chat is that version that comes with your licensing. Everybody has access to Copilot Chat. If you have an Office 365 license, it's there for you. Some organizations may hide it or basically unpin it, but it is there available for everybody out there who has a license. So it looks at all that activity. So that's web-grounded activity, or maybe they're doing a summarization of a file they uploaded. We see all of that activity. So we're basically covering all the different Copilot we have out there. And this also covers Copilot Studio. So this includes Copilot Studio full version, the one we call more pro code. It also covers Copilot Lite. So Copilot Lite used to be called Agent Builder. Basically, they're all declarative agents at the end of the day. It's what we kind of talk to them in the background with what I think the official term is for them these days. So it covers all those. So it's anything created with Copilot Studio, whichever version you have of Copilot Studio. Also covers anything that may be a SharePoint agent. So if you can build an agent right on a SharePoint site, it'll do that. It also looks at any custom agents that people have created. So you can create agents within, if you have the ability to and you have a license, you can create an agent within Copilot to look at a SharePoint site. It covers that. So it covers all those Copilot experiences. What it does cover is Security Copilot, unless you have pay-as-you-go. Same thing with Copilot and Fabric. So those are both pay-as-you-go models. If you want to have communication compliance, looking at those, we do have a bit of a pay-as-you-go. That also goes through the other generative AI apps as well. So enterprise AI apps, and you can kind of see what they're talking about. These are actually non-Microsoft Copilot, non-Microsoft generative AI. Things like ChatGPT, things like something built in Azure, or Ensure as well. So you can build these actual different large language models inside of Azure, and use those and deploy those to organizations. If you want to have communication compliance active on those, and this is really with Azure Foundry, right? Then you would have a pay-as-you-go model. And that goes also then for any other generative AI apps. As you see down here, I think the list is around 1,000 right now in Defender for Cloud apps that we can see. So if you want to monitor for those, there is a bit of a process we have to go through with Defender for Cloud Apps integration, but it is a pay-as-you-go model there as well. So just be aware of that. But for our intensive purposes, and for a lot of what we're going to be using this for moving forwards over the next couple of years, is really focusing on Copilot. And just know that Copilot is covered pretty much all usages of Copilot that you can think of when it comes to chat or Copilot Excel and all the rest. And also the agents. And that also includes things like the researcher agent or the analyst agent as well. So it covers all of those. And then you can make, if you just want to look, you don't want to look at Studio, if you don't have Studio, you can do that. Just be aware though, if you do have Copilot licenses, you probably have agent usage you may or may not be aware of. So just kind of know that. If you want these to actually light up, you do have to have that pay-as-you-go set up for communication compliance. That's when you have the option to actually check these. We're not able to do that in our tenants, these demo tenants, so can't really show you the setting up the pay-as-you-go. There is great documentation on it, and I'm sure Ben or Kevin have dropped that into the chat window already. So that's the where. Where am I looking for it at? And then we have, what I'm looking for at this point. Inbound, outbound, internal, that really doesn't apply that much to Copilot. That's more of an email/team setting. I always just leave them checked just to be safe. But I've done it both ways. I've turned them all off, and it doesn't really affect Copilot interactions at all. But I just leave them on. And then what are we looking for? So notice this is the one we created out of the box. So this is a default policy, and it's looking for prompt shields and looking for protected materials. Prompt shield at this point is really looking for things like prompt injection attacks, people that are burying possibly hidden text within a document, all these different things to basically make a generative AI engine misbehave. And that's what we're talking about for prompt shields. Protected materials is really looking for copyright stuff, making sure that people aren't abusing copyrighted materials within their prompts to create whatever X, Y, and Z. So these are just the defaults. But of course, you can go through and make changes to this. So I can go through and let's say just take everything off. Maybe I don't want to look at those. I have it already configured, so I'll show you what it looks like. But I can also say, pick any of these other trainable classifiers that may be out there. And you can see these are the premium ones. So the sexual ones, hate, self-harm, prompt shields. These are the ones that are on the premium side of the house. If you want to use those, it's pay as you go. But then the rest of these, you can see discrimination. So you can kind of tailor these to where you want to go when it comes to trainable classifiers. You can even use custom trainable classifiers. So if you want to make your own trainable classifier, you can do that as well. Maybe you have a specific use case that's not covered by ours. You can go through the process. It's not a horribly difficult process, but you do have to actually train the machine language on SharePoint data, giving it both positives and negatives. Ben, if you guys want to drop a trainable classifier link in there, I think that'd be good too, just so people know what's out there. But I took it all away. So I'm going to show you some other options. So I don't actually have to do trainable classifiers. So notice I can say, trainable classifiers here. I can say sensitive information types, and I can even say words or phrases. The rest of these don't really apply that much to Copilot. I guess you could look if you want to see if people are has a retention label. Not really useful, honestly. But maybe the file extension could be. But for the most part, these top three are what we're going to be working for and focusing on with communication compliance. So you can pick, your trainable classifiers, just like you had the other one. So I can say, oopsie. You can say, what are those sensitive information types I have out there? And you'll have all the ones that are available in your tenant, whether they are default, like ABA routing numbers or medical terms and conditions. They also have all of your customs too. So if you go back and kind of filter on publisher, you can see that I have a bunch of customs in here too. And these are just the ones that I've created by myself. So you can see they're Contoso, Contoso, Contoso. These are the ones I've created. Those could also be used for communication compliance policy. But, just things that I look at a lot, medical terms and conditions is always a big one for me. Just because of, the industry that I actually work with and my customers are in. So we'll use medical terms and conditions. That's a big one. Types of medications, always good. Generic medications, brand names, terms and conditions, Medicare beneficiary lists, and even lifestyle. So this would cover a lot of what I would look for from just a healthcare lens focus. Now, based on your industry, of course, these are going to be different. If you're in financial services, of course, kind of identify what those are going to be. If you're in manufacturing, that could be different. If you're in consulting services, just depending on what you're looking, you'd be looking for things like keywords even. So that's a possibility. So I can basically say, let's look for these words or phrases. So maybe we're going through a merger and an acquisition or acquisition, something like this. I'm not going to spell this right. So maybe I'm looking for particular keywords, or we're going through an M&A right now, and I want to see if anybody's using Copilot to look for details about that M&A. So again, you had to have that flexibility on what type of things you actually want to be looking for. And then, of course, we have the trainable classifiers too. So we can go back and add those in, just depending on what you want to do. You can have multi, I guess, trigger capabilities. So I could say, let's look for sensitive information types here, and I'll pick this one out really quick. So I'm just going to do this for simplicity's sake. But then I can also add another group, and it also has, let's say more another type of information type, or maybe I want to change that around to look for trainable classifiers as well. So you can look for multiple things in here. It doesn't just have to be one thing. So for instance, here I'm also looking now for a trainable classifier. So now I'm looking for ABA routing numbers and profanity. Maybe people are sending bank account numbers and swearing. I don't know. But you have that ability to kind of mix and match these to where you want to set them up as. So just be aware of that one. Going back to the defaults, though, I'll just add those back in so you can see them. Put my trainable classifiers back in. And just add these two. So that's basically back to what it was for defaults. OCR, I mentioned that before. You do have the ability to turn on OCR. Not exactly sure how relevant that is with Copilot. I do see some situations where people could be scanning an image and then using Copilot on it, so maybe want to get the text out of that one. Possibly people might be trying to be creative and smuggle out information or just use Copilot on information. It makes more sense when it comes to email or Teams, honestly. And there is a charge with that. So you can turn it on or off. Just to know there is a charge with it. And this is that review percentage. So how much do I want to actually look at? Do I want to see every single match for this policy? And maybe you do, and especially during testing. So when you set this up for testing, highly recommend you see every single one. It's just lets you know what's going to be collected, how it's going to look, and it just gives you practice of going through, triaging these alerts and going through. And then as you become more comfortable with it, then you can kind of tune this down. Maybe you want to see 50% of everything that's going on. But it also kind of depends on what you're looking for. If it's something super sensitive to your organization, like for instance, my examples of patient data, healthcare data, medical terms, conditions, those are considered like the crown jewels of healthcare. So if we're monitoring for those and Copilot usage and something we're really concerned about, then I'd always want to see 100% of that just because of the sensitivity of it. And you can also kind of make the assumption the more types of sensitive information you're looking for, the more specific, hopefully the less you're going to see of it. Most organizations have policies around using patient data and those things with generative AI. So we're hoping we're not seeing too much of it, but we need to make sure at the end of the day. Email blast doesn't really have any real say to it. So right now you can basically understand we're looking for these particular pieces, and then we have this review percentage, what we're actually going through, and then we have set up our particular locations as being Copilot, and then you can kind of see. So scope locations, Copilot, who are my reviewers? So that's me. Who are covered by this? So it's everybody in the organization. No one's excluded. But remember, we can go through and go back and modify this if we so choose. So just hit create. And your policy is going to be up and running. Now, heads up for everybody, don't start testing this immediately. It does take time to kind of filter through the system. It says official documentation, 24 to 48 hours. What I usually tell people, especially for testing purposes, set this up on a Friday and come back and start kicking the tires on Monday and Tuesday. And that'll kind of give you a good wath. And so you can start actually doing your testing and start getting some results. So that's a policy creation basically from a default policy. I'm going to pick this up one more time and just show you what it looks like as a custom policy. Won't take as much time when I get back to actually looking at the alerts and the triage we can do. But just so you know the experience, give it a name. Always give it a good description, unlike me. Admin units, we talked about that. Again, who are we actually going to include? I'm going to keep all users at this point. I'm going to set myself back up to administrator. And this is where the one piece comes in. Oops. So I can basically choose it again, have generative AI in here. So basically, I'm just creating the same one, just doing it from a custom policy, same terms and conditions. So pretty much all the same. You just figure out what you're looking for. Was that train of classifiers? We can do this one just for, I don't know, sensitive information types. And we can just look for, I like the medical terms one because I do use that often. And it does a good job of pulling up most of what I'd want relevant. I'd probably throw PHI in here as well if I wanted to. Probably the disease one too. But now it's going to be looking for all three of these. You do have the ability to kind of tune this as well. So with this, you can look for one instance, or you can look for up to any number of instances. But let's say you want to look at something a little more granular. So you want to see basically anything that says, okay, if I see 50 of these medical terms or medical terms and conditions up to any, so that means I would have to have at least 50 terms and conditions in a Copilot prompt to trigger this one. Not particularly useful with Copilot. Usually I would just say keep it 1 to any for all of these, just because of the fact that, we want to keep an eye on how people are using it, especially if it's some such sensitive information. The sliding scale here about instance counts makes a lot more sense when it comes to email usually, because somebody's sending out, an Excel spreadsheet that has 500 what medical information or patient data in it. We're more concerned if somebody's sending out one because they could be sending out their own. But no, you do have that option to configure that there as well. And then create policy and we're off and running. So 2 ways to do it. One other place you can create a policy before I dive into that is in DSPM for AI. So in DSPM for AI, we also have the ability to create a communication compliance policy, and it will use the default policy for, here we go. So you can see, here we go, communication compliance. So it actually lists out all the ones you've actually set up in DSPM for AI. And it gives you the ability to look at the matches you have in here. So you can also see it from this dashboard, but you can create a default policy in here as well. Same thing for insider risk and DLP. They can be created inside of DSPM for AI. So just be aware of that one. So a couple places created. But let's go back and look at some of these results. So I'm going back into policies. Yeah, we're doing good on time. Good. And you'll see quite a few policies I've set up. And I've been, steadily just kind of chipping away. For just testing purposes, I do recommend testing over multiple days. So do a few actions one day, do a few actions another day. It's good to have multiple people testing with you as well. So kind of come up with a testing methodology. So if you're using something like medical terms and conditions, use Copilot to create a bunch of medical terms and conditions for you, and then do prompts over them. So summarize these prompts, explain these medical terms and conditions for me, or whatever piece of data you're using. If you're using social security numbers, make sure you get a good match for social security number, test it out that way, same thing, credit cards and all the rest. And just give it a good amount of testing. So we want to see results from all different ways. But here you can see a couple of mine. So here I have my Copilot, one of my ones I've set up earlier that I've got a lot of triggers for. I just click on the policy and it brings up all the different things that have been going on. And I can slide this over to the left a bit. There we go. So notice I did have that sentiment analysis turned on. So that's going on. So it's looking for whatever kind of sentiments it in here. I probably haven't done, there's a couple negatives I have in here. So I did do some testing to try to get some negative responses. Here's another one as well. But when I actually click on these, so you can see here, it gives me a quick synopsis. So I can see, give me a short description of each. So that was a prompt that was put in. And here's the response. Here's a short description of common medical terms and conditions. So that's exactly what I was doing. So you can see here on this former prompt, this is where I actually did it, list out common medical terms and conditions. So that was the prompt it captured. And notice it captured it because I said, list out medical terms and conditions. And then it gives me all the different responses it gave back. So it gave me all these different ones, stroke, cancer, blah, 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 blah. And then I did a second follow-up prompt that said, you know what, give me a short description of each of these. So it gives me a short description of each of these particular pieces, blood pressure, describes blood pressure, heart rate, body mass index, gives me a description of all of those. So that's a great example of that particular policy that I have set up that's actually looking for medical terms and conditions. Brings it out, and I'll show you some of the other pieces we can do here with that. But notice you see the summary. You can even see it in plain text if you so choose. And then you can also see the user activity. So this will come back and show me some correlation events for that particular user that may be going on. So you can see here, that particular user, MOD administrator, that's me. I sent Copilot 39 messages matching this particular policy. So it gives you details on that particular person who's doing that as well, how many they have hit, because maybe it's completely benign. And that's the thing you really kind of got to use a little bit of judgment for. Maybe I'm a doctor and I'm doing this, and you know what? That makes complete sense. If that's the case, then I would click resolve, and then basically resolve that. Put a comment in. This looks like it's normal activity for that particular user. I can dismiss it as well, so I can basically dismiss the alert so it doesn't show up again. And then I have the options to, if you have security Copilot, I can do a summarization on it. I do not have security Copilot, so I'm not actually able to do that. But if you do have that ability. And then we have a couple of other options. So notice I can tag it. So I click on tag, and I have these different tags in here. So whether it's compliant, questionable, non-compliant, dismissed, and that basically puts a note on that particular thing. It's like, this looks a little odd, marking it as questionable for now until we escalate to the user or an explanation, something like that, right? So this puts a little tag on here, and now you'll see it on the left-hand side under my tags. So let's let that come back again. And you'll see now it's been marked as questionable. I can click on it, and I can even see those tags. So I can actually see the tag that's on here. And it does that, you can see that little bit of explanation that's on there. So it basically gives us a little earmark for that particular prompt or that response for us as something to talk about later. Now, I did mention escalation. So I can click here, and I can click escalate. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to send an email to a particular person out there. So I want to send an email to this other reviewer. So I want you to check this out. Please double check me on this one. So this could be my manager. This could be just somebody else that I'm working with. And what it'll do is it'll send an email off to that particular user. And I'll have a link directly to this particular policy and this particular item as well. So they can click on it in their email, and it'll go directly to this, so then they can take a look at it, give some feedback, however we want to go about doing that. So that's really what the escalate people is. You can escalate, if you have more than one person set up as a reviewer, you can escalate to more than one person. So we do have that kind of possibility as well. And then escalate for investigation. That's our final one. So when I click on this, it's going to create an e-discovery case. So it's actually going to create an e-discovery case for me. So I can call this Copilot MOD prompt weird or something. Just give it a name. And this is going to create a case. And then I would put notes in here about, hey, we saw this. This looks weird. Looks weird. Do we need to place it on hold for now? Or whatever you think. Maybe we would create a case. Maybe we need to export it out immediately. We put those notes in there. But we click on create a case, and it's actually going to go back and create a case in e-discovery. And I'll show you that just in 1 second. Any questions in the chat that have not been answered so far as that's creating the case? Ben, Kevin, how are we looking over there?
I think we're doing good so far.
All right, good deal.
Yeah, between me and Ben, I think we've covered pretty much all of them. But if anyone in the audience has anything that we haven't covered on this, please do so. We'll cover it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna. So creating that case, now I'm going to pop over here into e-discovery. Now, granted, I do have pretty much all the permissions I need, so I'm able to bounce back and forth between all these. That may not be the case for you. You may just be the one looking at communication compliance alerts and escalating to people, but that would come back over there. And now you can see I do have this new one that's just created, Copilot MOD prompt weird, but there's nothing inside of it. So right now, this is just a case that's been created. It has the notes that I put in there as well. And now it's up to what do we want to do? So in that kind of flow, if I was thinking about this, I'd probably do something like this, Copilot. If I just want to search for those like we talked about last week, I would just click my sources. So for this one, it's going to be that MOD person, since that was the person who's escalated to, or about, that's the better way to put it. So MOD. and just mailboxes, because that's where Copilot data is. So now he's my custodian of the case. He's the person I'm going to do the search on. And then just search for Copilot at this point. So I'm looking not necessarily for keywords, so we can remove that, but I am looking for item class, type in Copilot, Copilot activity. Now that's going to do a search for any Copilot, all Copilot activities that person has done forever at this point, whatever's in his inbox, any Copilot prompts he's done, that'll go through and create it. So that's kind of that process about how we go through, and we go from communication compliance. We have those alerts, or we have those policies and the details of the policy. We can see what's going on. And then we have those abilities to test, resolve it, summarize, or tag it, escalate it, or as I just did then, escalate it for investigation, which then takes it over an e-discovery case. So kind of a workflow there, something in real life. That's how I've been using it. It's how I work with customers. That's how we use it. And then a couple other things to see. So you do have your alerts. So you can see the alerts that come up. They'll pop in here. These are aggregated alerts. So as you do materials, they'll come in here. They'll kind of be aggregated, so you can kind of see those in there, and do some triage there as well. And then you have your reports. So the reports are where you can kind of see things more all up, holistic point of view. So for instance, you can see any different policies that have been matched in the last 30 days. You can see resolved items in the last 30 days. You can see the policies of the most matches in the last 30 days. You can also see those users with the most matches. So you can see MOD, me, and this is also called out Copilot. So this is when you're seeing Copilot as a response or as a policy match. That's the actual response back. So when you put a prompt in, this is Copilot coming back with details. So you'll see that in there, and you'll see that number quite a bit, but that's to be expected. And then you have even more detailed reports. So you can have a report on all your different policies. So if you want to see all the different policies out there, we can export this out. So it kind of gives us a one-stop shop to be able to look at everything all at one time, which is useful, especially if you're going back, you want to do an audit. You've got a bunch of stuff that was set up gradually over time. Do we still need them? Do we have things that are duplicative? All those pieces that are in there. So it's a good one just to look at. It's a nice thing to review every couple times, twice a year, on a every other quarter basis, just to make sure that we're doing it the right way. You can also see the items. So which items have been detected the most, and which policies are getting the most hits as well. So those are out there. You can see the ones with the different escalations. You can see activity by certain users. You can filter just to see on who's actually triggering these the most. Maybe we need to have a talk with Zimmy or with myself. This is my account. So maybe we have to have a talk with them. So you have that ability. And then you also have the sensitive information type. This is actually pretty useful as well. If you are looking at certain sensitive information types and you want to see which ones are getting the most hits, this is how you see it. So remember in that one, I set it up for 8 different medical terms and conditions. I had diseases in there. I had lifestyle things that may trigger medical conditions, all these different things I had in there. So this will give you a good view of which ones are actually being hit the most. Whether it's that medical terms and conditions, that was one probably be hit the most. But depending on the different policy you have set up, it's a good way to kind of see all the ones that are out there, which ones are getting the most hits. And that also gives us another decision point. So, if we're seeing a lot of people using Copilot on, let's say, medical terms and conditions or something like that, do we need to think about a DLP policy about that? Do we need to put a label on that, use auto labeling to actually find that data so people can't use it within Copilot? So it kind of gives you those nice little data points to use as well. And I don't know why this thing is taking so slow. Try it one more time for it to build. But it's a great way to use it as well. It kind of gives you that information about which ones are being. There we go. So you can see I got a couple out here that are hit the most. These are both custom ones that I've set up for testing purposes. I've been using them quite a bit over the last few weeks to kind of show how this works with the custom sensitive information type too. All right. That brings me to the end of this one. Anybody who would like to come off mute to have a question, feel free to keep putting them in chat, but feel free to come off mute if you so choose. Anything in the Q&A app?
I think everything's pretty much covered in the chat. This last one I need to look up, Jay, is whether or not some of the trainable classifiers like protective material and prompt shield are available for GCC tenants, and that may not be released to GCC yet.
That's a great question, and I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
I know somebody we can ask. Do we know who asked it?
I can't see the names from my side, but
Oh,
but I would say presumptively, if they have a GCC tenant and they're not seeing that, then it's just not available for GCC yet.
If you don't see it, yes, it's probably not available for GCC. I've actually
I would agree as well.
Yeah.
GCC is always delayed because we have to go through additional conformance and regulations and a lot more scrutiny for the for those services.
Background checks, all kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just to mention inside this, security and technical update briefing for some of the customers who get that. That's all mentioned in that, whether it's coming in specific sections for GCC and I believe the DoD as well. So
you could possibly also look on the roadmap, M365 roadmap, because you can do filtering for different types of tenants on there too. So it might give you some information. But if you're not seeing it there, more than likely it's just not available yet. Awesome. Any other questions that people have today? Okay. All right then, everybody. Well, really appreciate the time. Thank you all for showing up on a Friday, a Halloween Friday. So happy Halloween once again for everybody. Hopefully you have some good activities planned tonight. Hope there's trick-or-treating, lots of candy. And thank you again for spending this hour with us. We know 1 hour of your time is extremely valuable. So we're really appreciative that you spent it with us. So thank you so much. I will be sending an email out shortly. They'll have a link to the recordings. It'll have the PDF of this particular deck. Any of the links that we put in the chat will be included in there as well, plus a short survey. Please fill out the survey if you don't mind. That would be great. Really helps us tailor these and get them exactly what you want to hear content-wise. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up, next week, Insider Risk Module, Insider Risk Management, with our great Kevin, as a host. It's going to be a great session, so everybody come and join us next Friday as well. Same time, same channel. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.
Real quick, Jay, if somebody, the person that asked about prompt shields and protective materials, I did get Copilot to throw me something on the rollout there. So it looks like mid-November for public preview. And then general availability to come. Wait, Q4 2024. Well, it should be. Okay, never mind. Yeah, I didn't read the year on that. I think it hallucinated a little bit. So.
Always a good example of trust but verify.
That's right.
But yeah, if you're not seeing it, you'll probably see it relatively soon. And definitely check the roadmap for GCC tenants. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Have a good weekend.